We'll start our second round of questions with Mr. Motz. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. You know, one of the things that I've sat for the first hour or first 2 hours this morning and I listened carefully, and I'm still concerned as Canadians are, is, you know, how did this happen? And the confidence they need to ensure that it doesn't keep happening. We haven't had that yet today. And I appreciate the fact that our national security apparatus acted responsibly and efficiently to thwart the attack, and that's kudos to them. However, there was a failure that occurred. We need to ensure that that failure doesn't keep happening. Now, Mr. McCormick, CBSA has a critical role and responsibility in the process to protect Canadian citizens from those coming into Canada with dangerous or divisive ideologies, and who pose a threat to our national security and public safety, and to not allow them entry. And you have, you know, you've talked about multiple ways that you do that. Now, what's interesting that I found is I go through the timeline that we were given just before the meeting today about the various times that the accused in this matter, senior, was refused as a non-genuine, visitor. He then received a temporary resident visa. He was refused again, or not refused. He was given it. He was then assessed and found that a risk indicator, and that happened over and over and over again. These risk indicators. That's when CBSA is supposed to step in and take over. Now, what checks did you actually conduct to make that happen? Do you have access to the database that Mr. My NDP colleague talks about, the Shagan database? Did you run this individual through the FBI database? What actually are you through the Homeland Security database? Did you run them through anything that would give rise? Obviously, someone who is in an office who's interviewing this individual had concerns. They identified a risk. That same risk appeared again months later. It again appeared again years later. Yet this person was able to get temporary status, permanent status, and then become a Canadian citizen, all while these risks were being presented. How can we sit here today and ensure the Canadian public that we know that there's a problem, but we don't know, obviously this timeline even identifies the problem, and yet he was still able to be here. And I'm actually quite concerned about what that actually means. You also indicated that you mentioned before in testimony previously that CBSA has a role to play in removing people ordered removed from this country. Of those people that were ordered removed, how many actually remain at large? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, I think of the ones that were removed, they were removed. There's about
there's thousands that are ordered removed. Right. Some of them are ordered removed based on the risk to Canada.
I apologize. I don't have, through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize. I don't have our kind of removal stats immediately at hand, but I think you're absolutely right in the sense that last year we actually did remove 15,000 people, but there are, for example, about, in public reported data, it's about 30,000 people who are on we're trying to track down, for example.
Right. And many of those you can't find, right?
Correct.
So it's reasonable to presume, based on how this individual gained access to this country and received citizenship, that some of those also have got into this country, illegitimately. Now, one of the concerns that I wonder about is, as you navigate, and Miss the lady from Miss Safar from immigration as well. You guys have a joint role to play, and really, you guys do the interviews, and you guys are the first matter of defense before it gets into CSIS if there's an issue. What do you do, and how do you check to make sure that obviously people lie to you all the time? And I'm sure is that what happened here? And what steps are being taken by both CBSA and immigration and refugees to make sure that you can see through the lies that obviously this person told, because people come to Canada for legitimate reasons and for illegitimate reasons, for nefarious reasons. So what are you doing to ensure that those who lie to you are caught? and not allowed in?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would like to start by saying the vast majority of those individuals who visit Canada, of which we had over 7 million applications we processed last year, the vast majority of them are truthful, genuine visitors to Canada. We at the IRCC are responsible to determine not only admissibility, but also eligibility. So I would like to clarify the two, Mr. Chair. The eligibility is really around, are you eligible under the conditions set out in the Act? So are you coming to be what you say you're coming to be? If you're applying as a visitor, do you intend to stay temporarily?
So with that in
Mr.
mind,
Motz,
What's
Mr.
that?
Motz, you're done. But I'm just giving you time to answer your question.
okay, thank you. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the eligibility would include whether or not you are a genuine visitor. So that's separate from the admissibility when we would start to screen where we do the security screening and then perhaps refer to our partners for a comprehensive security screening. Our applications set out a number of different questions where we do rely on the information that's provided by the applicants. However, the applications ask for a number of different details for the individuals to provide, and those details are then assessed against the risk indicator packages, which again are clues to the officer where we might need to do a little bit more of a comprehensive digging. We also submit biometrics, not only to the RCMP, but we have information sharing agreements with our Five Eyes partners. So we are able to check with them if there is any known derogatory information on the individual who is applying to enter Canada. The risk indicators as well, I would like to point that the risk indicators are based on the serious inadmissibilities in the legislation. So it's not only on security grounds, which would include espionage, terrorism, danger to Canada. It could be for human rights or international violation, human rights or international rights violations. It could be for serious organized crime as well. So all of those different indicators are part of our risk indicator packages. And my colleague at the CBSA.
Thank you. I'm going to have to cut you off there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very quickly.
It's those risk indicators that are developed by CBSA and CSIS and that we provide training to IRCC officers on that tell it this is a file that you should look at. It's not a definitive statement there is a risk. It is a question. It prompts the question that leads to the comprehensive security screening that we do in partnership, not instead of, but we do in partnership with organizations like CSIS.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Motz. We go now to Ms. Zaid. Go ahead. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is to Ms. Zafar or Ms. Gill, whoever so can answer. I know that all TRV applications, all permanent resident, temporary foreign workers, students are screened and you have a process at IRCC. What collaboration and at what stage do you do with the agencies like CSIS, CBSA, and RCMP? Are all the applications referred to these agencies, or it is like a portion of the applications if there are any concerns from your initial stage? So, and if you can also provide some details like last year, how many cases you referred to them?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So absolutely, all temporary resident applicants to Canada, so that includes visitors, those coming on student permits and work permits, are screened by IRCC in that initial stage for security and other reasons. We will look at the application. The officers have to be fully convinced that the individual is not inadmissible to Canada. So there may be some back and forth with the individual collecting further information. As it was mentioned earlier, our officers can also interview the individual to collect the information. If there are any concerns that remain outstanding or risk indicators, our officers will then refer that for a more comprehensive security screening to the CBSA and CSIS. When a recommendation is returned from the CBSA, our officer will take into consideration that recommendation. We also are subject to the rules of procedural fairness. So if an officer with a non-favorable recommendation from our security screening partners has further questions, they will provide a procedural fairness letter or some opportunity for the applicant to address those concerns in order to fully satisfy the officer that the individual is not inadmissible to Canada before rendering a final decision. My colleagues at the CBSA or CSIS may wish to talk more about the comprehensive security screening process.
Would you like to add something to that?
What I would add in terms of when the file comes to us, we do, as suggested, we do, as part of our comprehensive security process, we, in addition to kind of understanding who the applicant is and their travel history, their work history, who they are, and does their story make sense, we review their name against all of our internal intelligence and enforcement databases. We also have access, thinking of some previous questions, we also have information and sharing agreements with our Five Eye partners and are able to make requests for information to partners around the world in order to gather information about people. Some of the systems, and I can't talk about the specific systems we have, again, because we don't want to give those adversaries information about what we do and how we do it, but I can assure members of the committee that we do have access to information from international partners.
My next question is that in regards to the citizenship, like, can you explain to this committee more about the process of revocation and the thresholds that must be met to, in case if you have to revoke citizenship for anyone?
Thank you for the question. There is, under the Citizenship Act of Canada, provisions that allow for the revocation of someone who has been granted citizenship. And under that, the Minister of IRCC may seek a declaration from the federal court that the person obtained citizenship by false representation or fraud or knowingly concealing material circumstances. So the process for that is such that IRCC does an initial assessment as to whether or not there is sufficient evidence and information to proceed with starting the revocation process. The client is notified, the individual is notified that there is some information and we're assessing. They're given 30 days from a procedural fairness perspective to provide any additional information they'd like to do so, at which time the IRCC, on behalf of the minister, advises the client that we are pursuing and moving forward with a revocation procedure. Depending on the circumstances under which of those three areas or the combination, the false representation or fraud or knowingly concealing material circumstances, we would then proceed with a submission to the federal court, who would be the decision maker in terms of the revocation, although the client always has the choice to request that the Minister of IRCC be the decision maker.
Do you have time? 20 seconds. I'll give. Thank you.
Thank you. On y va maintenant, Monsieur Fortin.
Now, Mr. Fortin, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be to the representatives of the Department of Immigration. Ms. Zafar, we know that the son who arrived came from the United States, whereas the father, we don't know where he came from. He came in 2018 at Lester B. Pearson. Do you know where he was coming from?
Merci pour la question, Mr.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair.
At this time, due to the ongoing criminal proceedings, I am unable to provide any further details on the father.
OK. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre parmi les témoins?
Okay, could another one of the witnesses, does another witness know where the father came from and is able to tell me?
Personne ne sait.
No one knows? I'll get back to the son, Ms. Zafar.
Point of order.
Oui.
Mr. Garrison, on point of order.
Just to clarify, it was said that no one knows, but can we just understand if no one knows or if no one can provide the information? Because I think it's very important.
C'est impossible de savoir. Mais je ne veux pas perdre mon temps. Vous avez arrêté mon temps?
Have you stopped my time, Mr. Chair?
Time. Could we just clarify that question?
Member, for the clarification, and it is correct to say that, as Ms. Zafar mentioned, we are unable to comment on that detail due to the ongoing proceedings.
Very well, thank you. Allez-y encore, Monsieur Fortin.
Go ahead, Mr. Fortin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue with Ms. Zafar. In the case of the son, it's indicated in the chronology that he came from the United States. He was born in Egypt, Egyptian citizenship, but he came from the United States. He entered under a refugee claim in February 2020. Why did he not return to the United States under the safe third country agreement?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
At a port of entry, which is managed by CBSA, he made an inland claim. I can't speak about his details in particular, but if somebody arrives at a land port of entry and makes an inland immigration or refugee claim, we assess them against the Safe Third Country Agreement, the SDCA. And there are a number of exemptions that apply to the SDCA, including that if you have an anchor family member here, so if somebody
Quelle est l'exception qui a été appliquée?
What is the exception that was involved in his case? Because in principle, he should have been returned automatically. So what exception applied here for the son?
I can't talk about this specific case, but what I can say that if you have family members in the country, that is one of the exemptions that are at play with the SDCA.
Même si le membre de la famille est un terroriste.
Even if the family member is a terrorist?
The SDCA says if you have an anchor, for example, if you have a family member who's in the country, you're exempt from the SDCA.
Oui, mais cette personne-là,
Merci, Monsieur.
Yes, but this person. Thank you. Sorry.
See. Mr. McGregor, please, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This committee has been told several times today that when actionable intelligence became available, all of the Canadian security agencies took action. And we can see from the timeline that it was in June of 2024 that CSIS became aware of the potential national security threat posed by the subject, who is an Egyptian national. I guess, there have been a number of questions today about, how we gather intelligence and how it's acted upon and how it's shared. And I know specifics can't be shared, but when it comes to an organization like ISIS, whose main theater of operations is in parts of the Middle East, which have for at least a decade or more suffered through war and all kinds of strife, I'm just wondering if CSIS could just inform the committee and maybe Canadians generally just what the challenges are in gathering intelligence in areas like that, just the kinds of challenges, whether it's from human-sourced intelligence, open-source intelligence, when you are operating in a theater that has experienced war for so long and may have crumbling infrastructure, little to no government records. Can you just talk a little bit about the challenges of what it's like to operate in that kind of an environment?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Honourable Member. I'm unable to go into the details of our specific operational activities either in Canada or abroad. What I can tell you is that the member is correct in that conflicts that are occurring abroad can have the potential to cross into our borders. And that can be from a range of threats, whether it be ideologically motivated, politically motivated, or religiously motivated. And I would again like to reassure the committee that, as stated earlier in our testimony, CSIS and our partner national security agencies have the resources and capabilities to address all threats as soon as we become aware of them, regardless of their provenance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor.